Shanks lost his arm on purpose. I just reread the first few chapters of One Piece recently for my YouTube channel here. And it starts off with Shanks and Luffy as he was a kid, and Shanks losing his arm to the Lords of the Sea. And during while reading that, I was like, I don't think it was an accident that he lost his arm, because on his arm Shanks had, as we recently learned in recent chapters, as a God's Knight, the Seal of the Abyss. He had a Shallow Sea contract on his arm that he lost to the Lord of the Sea while saving Luffy. Later he says to Whitebeard that he bet his arm on the next generation. So one might argue, okay, Shanks might have lost the arm on purpose, but it was not because of anything else, but to motivate Luffy, to give him a stronger motivator. Like, yes, he lost it on purpose, but to motivate him. But now, in the most recent chapter, 1168, we learn more about how the deep sea contract works. In this chapter, it is proclaimed that Shanks has gone missing. And he has conveniently gone missing right at the point where he was going to go from the shallow sea contract into a deep sea contract. Now, the people with the shallow sea contract don't know about Emu. They are not told who is this god you are serving. They are told you are a servant of God. You are a God's Knight. But they are not told who is the god they are serving. This god is Emu, who sits at the empty throne at the top of the world and rules the world government from the shadows. But barely anyone knows about this. Now, in chapter 1168, Harold is now unfortunately here in Castle Panchea, and since Shanks is missing, he is offered to enter into the Deep Sea Covenant. So he's asked, hey Harold, do you want to do this? And that's one very interesting thing, because the Gorosei asked Harold, hey, you have this opportunity. You have to, since Shanks is not here, you have the opportunity to go into the deep sea contract. They asked him. They don't command him. They're not telling him, okay, Shanks is not here, you have to do this. No, they asked him. The Gorosei are far above Harold's rank. They could just be telling him, hey, you have to, but no, they asked him. And why that is interesting is it might have to do something with the contract itself. Like, it's a Faustian deal with the devil, very clearly to me, like the way it's framed. With Emu, it's like you gain great power, you gain all these powers and all these things, but in return you have to give something. And for this contract to be valid, you have to do it willingly. You have to be like, you have to say, yes, I want to do this. Now, this is not one-to-one shown to us, but it is kind of hinted at by the Gorosei asking Harold. So we don't have Harold signing a contract saying, yes, I want to do this. And then there's small print on the contract actually telling Harold, oh, you are such an idiot. Now Emu has control over you. But that is more or less what happens. Because in this shallow sea contract, you don't have immortality, you don't have all these other powers of the God's Knights, but you're basically 1 foot into a contract with Emu. It's one step towards going into a contract with Emu. And the deep sea contract is where you go and learn about the existence of Emu. Harold meets Emu in this chapter, sitting on an empty throne. He's asking, who's this on the empty throne? And then Emu proceeds to zap Harold, like he transforms the tattoo on his arm somehow and enters Harold into the deep sea contract. Harold is like ecstatic and like, all this power, it's surging through my body, what is this? And the Gorosei explained to him that he's now obtained the immortality. The powers we see in the God's Night have, where they get cut, like even if their head gets blown off, they regenerate. They are immortal. And yeah, they tell him, yeah, you have the power of immortality. Now, you have great power now. So, but the way this happened wasn't by like someone taking a tattoo machine and like doing the right symbol on Harold's arm. No, it was just, the first tattoo was already there. Harold entered the throne room of the empty throne with the 20 swords, or 19 swords, I think it is. I think one sword is missing, or however that was, of the 20 kingdoms, and he enters and Emu just transforms his tattoo from one state into the other. Now, this has everything to do with Shanks, really. Like, Shanks is the catalyst for this even happening to Harold in the beginning. We know he has the Shallow Sea contract. We learned this in the recent chapters, but we also saw it already by him having the tattoo on his arm in a scene where he was in a hot tub with Scopocaban, like in a hot spring in Elbaf, and where he was talking to Scopocaban, and where he told him, like, yeah, I'm here in Elbaf now because I want to meet Harold. I want to talk to him. I want to warn him of something. So clearly Shanks was well aware of more than just the things Harold knew. Shanks was aware, like, yeah, I don't want to go into the deep sea contract. He somehow knew. Now, how did he know? Maybe his brother told him, like he was playing double, Shanks was playing double agent, or maybe triple agent, we don't know for certain right now. But let's just assume he was playing double agent up in Mary Shore, playing the God's Night and trying to figure stuff out, like about the Holy Land and about who's actually ruling it. And his brother is ahead of his rank, so he is already in the Deep Sea Covenant. So maybe he got information from his brother, Shamrock. Maybe Shamrock told him things he's actually not supposed to tell him, because no one that knows about Emu is supposed to tell anyone else about Emu. But since they are twin brothers, maybe Shamrock went against that. Maybe you told him. Who knows? How else would Shanks know? Maybe Shanks figured out. Maybe Shanks snuck into Castle Pangaea we saw with Sabo. That's not impossible. Even with observation haki and other things being a thing, sneaking up on Emu is apparently not impossible, as shown by Sabo sneaking up on Emu and listening in on the conversation with Cobra. So, no idea how Shanks figured it out, but he knew, I don't want to go into the Deep Sea Covenant, I don't want this to happen, I'm gonna lose, like, control. Because what then happens in this chapter is Harold goes to Elbaf, draws the demonic circle on the ground, the pentagram, for the abyss, and Emu tells Harold, I just reread the chapter, actually in this chapter, in the translation I had, Emu didn't say you create a abyss portal or a abyss pentagram in Elbaf, no. The way it was translated there, if that's correct, it's always an if with translations like these, if that's correct, the way Emu said it to Harold was create an abyss in Elbaf. So the abyss itself, represented by this circle he drew there. The circle being in Elbaf doesn't mean just there's an entrance to the abyss, there is the abyss on Elbaf. Very interesting. However, what happens next is Harold wanted to basically retire once Elbaf was part of the world government, and Emu told him very clearly, that is for Mu to decide. That is for me to decide. Emu refers to himself as Mu in the manga. When he talks about himself, it's like talking in third person about himself. It's like, yeah, Harold, that's no longer for you to decide if you retire or what you do. And after Harold draws the pentagram on Elbaf, Emu tells Harold to raise an army of giants for him. Mobilize all of the giants, not just a few of them now. It's like, mobilize all of the giants and make me a giant army. And that goes very much against what Harold wants. Harold wants to stop the old ways of the giant warriors. Harold wants the giants to stop being warriors and become shoulders and become open to the world and change their ways. So that is very much what he doesn't want for the giants. So he tells Emu, no, I can't do this. This goes against everything I want to do. And Emu tells him, well, you did enter into the deep sea covenant. And you got immortality for that and power. But in return, you cannot obey an order by me. You cannot obey an order of Mu. So basically you lose your not necessarily your free will, because we see Harold trying to fight against it and argue against it. And Emu even tells Harold, think what you want. You can think what you want, but you can't obey me. So basically his body is incapable of resisting Emu. His body can't fight against Emu. If Emu gives him a direct order, his body will go after this order. And maybe people like with lesser or greater haki can resist more or less, but in the end, even someone like Harold, who's extraordinarily strong, and I would assume that goes with extraordinarily strong willpower and extraordinarily strong haki. Like, for fuck's sake, he fought against rocks several times and they clashed several times without any one of the two winning. So Harold might be stupid, but he's strong. Yeah. He is strong and he has a strong will. And might misguided or stupid, but he still has that strong strength and willpower. So even he can't resist. He tries. He calls his guards and tells them to tie him to a pillar while he's holding on to a pillar, trying to resist his body, who's like basically pulling himself towards the pentagram on the floor. But we know in the end it's all for naught. So entering into the deep sea covenant gives you immortality and power, but you can't resist Emu anymore. You can't disobey any order anymore. Meaning, if Shanks was to step in front of Emu with this tattoo still on his arm, now is the question, could Emu, if Shanks still had the tattoo on his arm, if he still had his arm, could Emu just do like a small magic trick and transform the shallow sea covenant on Shanks' arm into a deep sea covenant, and then Shanks can't obey any order of Emu anymore? Or would Shanks have to be like, yes, I want to do this? Does Shanks have to agree to this? Either way, I would wager that Shanks wouldn't want to risk that. So, what to do? Well, this was 14 years ago. Luffy at the start of the journey is 17. Luffy, when Shanks is on the island, he's been 2 years on the island. And 14 years ago, Shanks is in Elbaf. So I think it's like 13 years ago to 13 to 12 years ago that Shanks is in Fuchsia Village for 2 years, where Luffy is. So I think that's the time frame, and then he's there for 2 years. until they find the Gum-Numi, the Nika fruit, and Luffy eats it, and before leaving, Shanks gets rid of his arm, because yes, I don't think that a sea beast like the Lord of the Coast could do anything to Shanks if he didn't want it to. I think Shanks used the Lord of the Coast like a knife to cut off his arm. Why not cut off his arm just with a sword? I don't know. Maybe more poetic. Maybe not even possible. Maybe he couldn't cut off his own arm because of the deep sea, lower sea covenant, the shallow sea covenant on there. Maybe he had to do it by a third party. But then just ask Ben Beckman to do it? No. Yeah, he could probably have done that. But yeah, for the story, it's more epic in that way, and Luffy cries about Shanks' arm. But yeah, I am now, after this last chapter, if I wasn't convinced before, now I'm convinced Shanks lost his arm on purpose. And I think that's the last proof I needed for it. And yeah, it enables Shanks to stand in front of Imu without having to fear falling under his spell. Because the tattoo was on the arm is no longer there, no longer attached to Shanks, and Shanks is free to go as he pleases. That's about it. Have a good one. Bye.